Jacob Rees-Mogg. Hello to you, Mr. Rees-Mogg. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. She's in quite a pickle, isn't she, over at Salzburg?
Oh, well, the Chequers deal doesn't work. It doesn't deliver Brexit, and it doesn't maintain the integrity of the single market. So the EU doesn't like it, and people who wanted to leave the European Union don't like it. Donald Tusk has merely repeated what Monsieur Barnier said a couple of weeks ago to the Brexit Select Committee, that the key parts of Chequers don't work from the EU's point of view, and the government needs to recognise that and come up with a better approach, which would be a Canada plus free trade deal, solving the Irish border on the basis set out by the European Research Group, which I chair last week.
Indeed so, although some of the proposals that you put forward from the European Research Group, even Boris Johnson, who we could also call as an arch-Brexiteer, thought they were just going too far.
Not on the Irish border. We've only concentrated on the Irish border. There were earlier draft papers that we haven't published. We focused on Ireland.
But he did have sight of them, didn't he? And he did think that they were a little bit too far. Are you saying that you were perhaps a little bit over the top to start with and you've honed that down? Is that what we're hearing from you?
What I'm saying is we focused on the Irish question, looking at it from the EU's point of view. What's the EU's objection is how to maintain the integrity of the single market. And so in our paper last week, which was launched by David Davis, two former Northern Ireland Secretaries of State, David Trimble, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in Northern Irish peace. What we were saying was that these are the EU's rules, this is how the EU does it elsewhere, the EU precedent, and this is how you can have a border, which exists already between Northern Ireland and the Republic, that doesn't have physical infrastructure, not the hard border that we've all tried to avoid. And nobody has so far managed to point out where we've got our facts wrong. They've merely taken pot shots at the report because they don't like it. But no one's been able to point out anything that's factually wrong.
OK, so, sorry, just to clarify, I'm obviously mixing up these reports. The Falkland Islands Task Force and the Star Wars, what was that about?
Look, that was not an ERG report. That was a member of the ERG who thinks that's a good idea, but the two are separate. OK,
you didn't think that was a good idea?
I think it's completely irrelevant to leaving the European Union. I'm not interested in random policy thoughts. What we want to focus on is how do we leave the European Union and what's the best way of doing that? What is our solution? Our solution is Canada Plus on trade, which the EU has offered us. So that's already there in the bag for Great Britain. And how do you then extend it to Northern Ireland? And that's with our solution to the Irish border question.
Prime Minister says that there is no viable option apart, and her proposal, the Chequers deal, would protect jobs and livelihoods. She says it's the only viable option. If it's not accepted, then we will have no deal and we will drop out of the European Union. Should we potentially be looking at trying to extend the deadline for Article 50 to try to come up with some sort of deal, albeit if she calls you and says, come on, Jacob, come into number 10 and we'll try and sort this out together?
Well, I think the beers and sandwiches approach worked pretty poorly in the 1970s, and I wouldn't want to see us go back to that. I think this idea that Chequers is the only viable deal is obviously not correct, because Chequers isn't viable. The EU was not going to accept it, and it's not leaving the European Union. And it won't protect jobs. It will deny us the opportunity to create jobs, because we will remain tied in to the failing European Union economic model, which has caused incredibly high rates of unemployment in other parts of the European Union. So it's not a viable model. It doesn't help us economically. Leaving on WTO terms, a world trade departure, is something that will not do us any harm and opens up opportunities for us to mould our own future. And I think British politicians and the British people can make good decisions for themselves, and better ones than Brussels bureaucrats can make.
With respect, Mr. Rees-Mogg, we always say that to each other, don't we? You didn't answer my question.
Well, I respect you greatly, not least because you're a wonderful cricketer, as you showed when you came to visit me.
Indeed so, when we did our K-meets with you at home. However, my question to you was, should we extend the deadline for Article 50?
No, definitely not. That would be, very administratively difficult, because you'd run into the European parliamentary elections, and the British seats in the European Parliament have already been reallocated to other countries. But also, British people voted to leave the European Union. The date we leave is the 29th of March. That's been passed into law twice now, and I think not to implement that law would be letting down the people who voted to leave, and would be a considerable failure of government policy.
Just while we've got you, talk to us about what happened with the kids being hassled outside the house. How did you feel about that?
Well, it's a free country and people are allowed to demonstrate, and it's very important to defend the right to free speech. My children laughed at this old chap who wouldn't shut up, really. They weren't upset, I'm glad to say, but inevitably I would have rather it hadn't happened. But thank you. People have been very kind and concerned, and I do appreciate that across the political spectrum.
Good to talk to you. Thanks, as always. Appreciate it. Sorry, we haven't got more time.